To our January 2019 meeting of the Design Review Board, and we appreciate you participating in the process where this board attempts to assist property owners who live in historic districts or in the overlay districts, Aiken Downtown Overlay District, in making improvements to their properties. And we have several applicants tonight that when we do read your name, our secretary will read the applicant's name and a summary of the application, and then we'll just ask whoever's representing you to just come to this center lectern and identify yourself and your residence, your address. Now, for the next minute or so, our board is reviewing the minutes for December, for the work session, and for the main meeting. That's December 4th. And we'll entertain a motion regarding those minutes, if you all wouldn't mind.
Approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for the work session and the regular meeting for December. Raise your right hand if you approve that. Thank you. Okay, and then now we'll go right into old business, and I'll ask our secretary, Mary Catherine, to begin by reading that summary.
First item of old business on the agenda is application number DES 18-01002. Applicants Martin Buckley and Lucy Knowles are requesting an amendment to the boundaries of the Historic Overlay District to include the site of the Aiken County Hospital and Nurses Home located at 828 Richland Avenue West.
Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, I'm recused from this application.
All right, we'll excuse you and then have you join the audience here. Okay. Is there any more you want to review? You don't need to read the whole thing, but I presume that then Martin or Lucy would come to the lectern then. Is that correct? We'll see. Lucy, are one of you all going to come to the lectern?
Well, if I understood the opinion for Mr. Smith, I'm completely recused and
Okay.
recused from
Speaking.
testifying.
I think we need somebody in order to move forward. Now, Martin certainly is eligible to come forward in case there are any questions. Martin, if you don't mind.
Hello, I'm Martin Buckley. I live on Two Notch Road. I think that the application is pretty much self-explanatory. It should all be there in front of you, and I'll be glad to try to answer any question you might have.
Okay. We had a pretty thorough discussion in the work session about the various options, including one that might be an alternate motion to just designate the main building. I know your application is to literally enlarge the historic district to include the whole property.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Okay. Do y'all have any questions or comments? We can discuss it even after a motion if you like. And we'll also ask if others want to speak.
Yeah, so Martin, basically you're wanting to, us to adopt or recommend that the whole 10 acres property, including the two buildings, are all historic?
Well, this is what the application was, and the application hasn't been changed, although I understand that you all might do it. So
Well, we'll see about
have at it.
that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.
Good. Thank you.
Very much.
And we'll see if others would like to speak. That's fine. Thank you. We then can have anyone who would like can speak in favor of this application or in opposition, but this is the opportunity to, as a public hearing for you all to do that. If not, we'll go ahead and Yes, you want to, we've got a couple of people. Go ahead, come, just give your name and address.
My name is Tyler Watkins. I'm with Work Architecture and Design, representing the developer that plans to develop the property at 828 Richland. I'm from Newport, Kentucky. And I want to first just recognize and commend Mr. Buckley and Mrs. Knowles for doing their city a great service by attempting to extend the historic boundary. I think that is an attempt and a great attempt to expedite the process of giving the project an opportunity to receive historic tax credit, rehabilitation tax credits. However, it's our opinion and our assertion that after having looked at the project extensively and through our analysis and expertise at what it is we do, we found that an extension of the boundary to include the entire property is actually going to somewhat form a stumbling block in front of our development, and we ask and propose that an extension of the boundary only include the historic portion of the property that would be just the hospital. And we're somewhat mutually aligned in that vision, in that we find that project needs a historic tax credit to exist. So whether or not the building itself, the historic hospital, is found within a historic district, or it's individually listed by the National Park Service, or your board, then that's something that we want to voice our absolute approval for.
Correct. Okay, good. Any questions of our applicant here?
Well, so if I understand your statement, you would like for us to recommend that some of the property not be included in the historic designation.
That's correct. It's a 9.3 acre piece of property. Much of it has some rather stark non-contributing buildings in existence that we would seek to demolish. And any bit of further jurisdiction that a UDRB might have just creates a bit of a stumbling block for us, as we're on a pretty fast trajectory to try to get the project started.
What basis would you offer that we not do the whole property from a historical point of view?
I'm sorry, I don't understand that question.
Well, I mean, if we were to change the application as written, we would need a basis for making that change. I'm trying to see if you have an argument as to why we would not want to do the whole thing from a historical perspective.
This answer sounds more crude, I think, than I care to respond with, but I would say to approve the historic boundary to include those things that are historic. I would argue that the balance of that property that doesn't have the historic structure on it is absolutely not historic.
I understand. So the nurse's home, for example, you'd say that is not a historic property?
That's correct. I'd consider it an accessory to the hospital building.
And you make that determination, I'm just asking, but it's your opinion,
Yeah.
Based on the age or what's your criteria for saying that's not historic?
I would base it on the use that it had and the current use that we have for it. Furthermore, I would posit that there's an opportunity to look at how the submission to the Park Service and our State Historic Preservation Office has to be written, in that there's a potential that property in and of itself may be individually reviewed by the Park Service, in that I'm not yet certain of what address each of the buildings on that property has. I would assume that the old voter registration building doesn't receive mail at the hospital, so they're probably all individually addressed. And that's actually how the Part 1s and Part 2s that go to the State Preservation Office are written, by the address. Similar to how a facade grant gets allocated in this city.
You're saying it may be an entirely separate designation and review from...
That's correct. And with or without that, being that we have the position that the project needs a historic tax credit, the Park Service is going to have a full review of what buildings are deemed to be contributing and not contributing. And there are lots of accessory structures attached to that hospital that are unsightly and dilapidated that need to go. I would lump the nurse's building, while it does have some grandeur to it that's different than the metal shed that's attached to the building, it still would fall under my classification as an accessory kind of outbuilding, and just a piece of the project that can't sustain itself affordably.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions? Good. We'll, thank you. We
Yeah.
may have you come back, but we'll ask if anyone else would like to speak in favor or in opposition.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Mhm.
Charlotte Wiedenman, President of the Historic Aiken Foundation and also a resident of the neighborhood, 626 Hayne Avenue. I would ask that y'all review this for the affirmative in the context of what the Design Review Board is and in relationship to the comprehensive plan that the city put out October of last year. And one of the important features in that summary document is maintaining and protecting our cultural resources. And this property is a cultural resource of Aiken. And it's not just the hospital, it is the nurses' building, and it's the iron cemented sandstone wall that surrounds the property. That is not something you find many other places in South Carolina. Those rocks were sourced locally, and they were built into walls and placed in gardens. It is something you see, and it's very indicative of Aiken. As far as the nurses' building goes, that was also a Willis Urban design, and though it came after the hospital, it is part of the hospital complex, and it's an important part of the history, because nurses' buildings were something that were reflective of the time, where there was housing for nurses and a way to protect a very important resource for the people here, to have those nurses close by and to provide some housing for them. So the nurses' building as a cultural resource and a historical resource can't be separated from the hospital, nor can the fence. So I would ask that, and I'm not looking at this from the standpoint of whoever comes in, I'm looking at it as a resident of Aiken and someone who is very passionate about Aiken's historic resources. And once it's gone, y'all, it's gone. So this is something that is ours, and this defines who we were and something that we were doing at the time. And so I think its preservation is incredibly important.
Okay.
Questions?
Any questions? No, thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, I'm sorry. So the other accessory buildings other than the nurses' building, is the Historical Society interested in those metal buildings essentially?
No, the metal buildings really don't fall under something we must preserve. But when we look at the property, though, as a whole, it's unfortunate that those buildings were placed there. But the property as a whole, we know that that was the site of the Park and the Pines Hotel, which, if y'all have ever seen the pictures of that place, was spectacular. So the property, the parcel itself, is an incredibly important parcel. And I think as far as the density, which is probably something more for BZA and planning, the density there is also something to think about in protection, because it was originally developed as a resort, fun, relaxing place with the salubrious pine-scented air. And so having it, not the metal buildings, but having it still maintain a look of a lot of green space there, I think is incredibly important. And also provides, a nice entry into our town, not just a clumped-in bunch of housing, so.
So how do you feel about the possibility of the property just staying in its current condition and not being used and basically dilapidating?
Well, no one likes to see it dilapidated, and I think for any of these buildings downtown that aren't currently in use, and we worry about their longevity when no one is there. I think there are people there who recognize the importance, and we have heard from them who were very interested in saving the nurses' building and saving the hospital. And then as far as their plan, they talked of a much smaller density. So I think that would be more in keeping with the look and feel of the area, which developed as cottages, accessory cottages to the sanatorium that was once on Richland, and then as rental cottages for the Highland Park Hotel. So if the hospital stays in its state and is converted into as a previous applicant had suggested, into housing, and then the parcel then being divided into smaller cottages. I think that's a closer feel to what we're used to downtown and would be a much better fit looking long range as what Aiken's plan for the future is.
Let me follow up on that. You've seen this one, you mentioned less density. This is, I think, the one that's most recently been presented. I think it's 4 buildings, 3 stories each.
5 buildings.
Is it 5?
No, 4.
Well, 4 new ones and then
The hospital.
the original one, yeah. Can you speak to you were just commenting that you felt like that cottages would be,
Right, because now, and I mean, I say I'm in this area, I work there, I mean, my office is across the street from there. So where the current nurses building is now, and they're looking to put a building, they say, oh, well, it won't be taller than the current hospital, elevation-wise, but the actual size of it will be. So it's something where everything in that area tends to be low cottage style, and you're looking at putting 4 very large structures that in effect will be larger than the hospital. They just won't be taller, but they sit downhill from it. So it's just kind of a hulk as you come into town, apartment hulks.
yeah, I'm not sure I think the one problem is the viability of it for residential. I'm not sure that it's viable to just put cottages, and the county hadn't sold it yet, so
Yeah.
I think that may not be a possibility. So I just wondered if this decrease in density had helped any.
It's still above what's allowed in the current documents.
And you're
Yeah.
speaking
I
as
speak-
Charlotte.
I speak as far as the density of Charlotte as someone who lives in the neighborhood.
Okay.
I speak to the loss of the nurses building and the iron cemented sandstone and the protection of the hospital as Historic Aiken Foundation.
Yeah. Now, I think that, as we said in the work session, it sounds like the wall and the front, actually the front will end up being improved. The circuitous parking that goes in and out of the magnolia trees will be removed, so you go back to a park area. No parking in front, so that does give you the character that I think you're looking for and would improve the facade of the building, in my opinion. So I think that's pretty much part of this proposal.
Well, the landscaping in the front is very nice and the green space is very nice, but I speak in terms of the protection of the nurses building
Okay.
as a loss of a cultural and historic resource and the iron cemented sandstone.
Okay. All right.
So all the magnolia trees in the world, and that's the difference, let me point this out. A natural resource, we can plant another tree tomorrow and we will have another tree. But we lose the nurses building and it's gone. We lose a Willis Irvin and it's gone.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you for speaking.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, this is going to be just, okay, come, just give us your name at the lectern and your address.
Hi, my name is Laura Bagwell. I live at 2111 Solstice Meadow Lane in Aiken. And I just had a quick observation that I wanted to throw out for the spirit of discussion. We're talking about whether or not the nurses building, nurses home can be saved, whether or not it's worthy. I appreciate that the Marion Group and has already made a good many changes based on our inputs and our concerns. So at the risk of generating laughter, I want to offer one more. Can I go to the board and show you?
Sure.
Well, all right.
So this is the nurses' building. This is green space. Is it possible to take this and go there?
I think I'm going to repeat your question. You're asking if the nurses' facility could be relocated, could be moved?
No, if the nurses' home could stay, but this
Relocate a building?
could be moved,
The buildings could be relocated.
and that would save the nurses' building. You still get
We can have them, I think that's a valid question. I wondered the same thing. But we'll let them come back. Yeah, thank you. Would you come back and, do y'all understand the question? Essentially, they're trying to shift some buildings to keep the nurses station. You don't have to, nurses building, could you get your same density? I think you probably could, but we may need you to just give your opinion, that's all.
Tyler Watkins again, Work Architecture.
Yeah.
That's something that we looked at, and of course, I think you can see in previous iterations of this plan, before we caught some revisions based off of comments we received, there actually was a building there. The only flip-flop of the issue of moving a building to preserve the nurses' building is that then we would have to find a use for the nurses' building, of which we have none. So it just adds expense to the project that really can't be sustained.
Has more to do with the modifications to the nurses building than the actual relocation of the, looks like these two buildings could be maybe slid down. I've got a slightly different plan. Yeah, that's right, could be shifted down further, possibly.
Why couldn't it be used for those other activity areas that you're going to put in some of these other buildings?
It could for an added expense that we really don't have room in our budget for.
Is there there will be an office that you come to see about renting an apartment or
Leasing
buying?
office inside one of the new buildings.
It's in one of the new buildings? Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions?
I guess another thing to consider about moving a building is that would subtract from our open space.
The open spaces at the bottom, you mean?
Correct. So there's a paved area in front.
Well, I think you'd get it back. You'd get the open space back around the nurse's building, probably.
Yeah, which is a parking area currently.
Do you have a fence around the retention pond?
No,
So it's just open and,
our plan is to landscape the retention pond.
And maybe have water in it, possibly, yeah.
We'd like to view it as an amenity.
Yeah, and we'll have a track around it, a walking track. Okay, and there will be some walking paths throughout,
Correct.
so it can be developed as more of a park kind of character than a apartment project. Yeah.
Correct.
And I think you all have some other projects you've done that include that type of environment. None of those are theirs, but I think I've seen some. Okay. Good, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Neil Myers, 1108 Valley Green Drive. I'm in the Historical Overlay District. So we answer to you on just about everything over the past. I want to ask a couple of questions. Is this the latest Marion design, artistic rendering?
It's the latest rendering, it's not a final engineered site
Still
plan.
has some defects that were pointed out at the Planning Commission. The parking and so forth, where cars would back out and back directly into cars coming around the curve. So it looks like an older design.
I can,
To say that the Marion Group is in business to make money, obviously. No one can fault them for that. But the density that they originally proposed was tremendous. They've backed off of that, and they're still exceeding the ordinance. If by including this and the overlay, historical overlay, you can help to maintain some control, I would like to see you do it. Now, I'm sure there are some old buildings that could be destroyed and should be. on that property. But I hope that you will include the entire 9.3 acres in the overlay district.
All right, so you're speaking in favor of the application as it was submitted then? Okay? Any other comments? Okay?
My name is Mandy Drumming, and I live at 412 Northwest Pendleton Street. Today, I kindly ask the Design Review Board / Historic Preservation to extend the Historic Overlay District to include the Old Aiken Hospital, including the main building, nurses building, and iron sandstone wall, all three historically and architecturally significant, and contribute to the story of the historic Aiken Hospital and the importance of wellness to Aiken. The original hospital building, established in 1917 due to the charitable efforts of a group of Winter Aiken colonists, was designed in a colonial revival style that showed some enthusiasm for arts and craft architecture. Although the 1917 hospital building no longer exists, the sandstone wall appropriately presumed part of the first hospital structure due to its entrance and exit points, and commonplace to late 19th and early 20th century arts and crafts architecture, still stands. The main hospital building, built during the mid-30s with federal funds and designed in a modern colonial revival style by Willis Irvin, recalls the exterior of the original 1917 hospital building and reflects the political climate of the 1930s. The nurses building, too, is architecturally significant. While the nurses building and its brick structure and decorative headers above its windows considers the modern colonial revival style of the main hospital building, it even more so than the main hospital anticipates the arrival of American modern architecture. This is evident in the nurses building's asymmetrical placement and size of windows and bold rectilinearism. With the main Aiken Hospital building, nurses building, and the sandstone wall established to aid the well-being and good health of the Aiken community, just as the Charlestonians came to Aiken to escape the bad air, the two buildings and wall contribute to an overlooked narrative that in part explains the establishment of the Winter Colony District 3. Considering the demographics, architecture, green spaces, and Aiken Preparatory School associated with Historic District 3, it can be argued the district area was founded on the ideals of the arts and craft movement, which emphasized pre-industrial sentiments as a healthy respite to the ill effects being caused by the Industrial Revolution. And I'm almost done, I'm sorry, I'm just passionate about this. Historic District 3 was established at the same time the arts and craft movement took hold in the United States, between circa 1889 and 1930. The American arts and crafts movement served as an antidote to the chaotic, unhealthy, and blighted city landscape that had become an ever-increasing byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. The movement was supported mainly by middle and upper-class Americans and proposed pre-industrialism sentiments such as, 1, retreating from the city to the country, 2, architecture, art, and literature that considered nature and referenced the medieval Gothic period, 3, high thinking, and 4, living a healthy lifestyle, including exercise, sports, which include horseback riding, especially out of doors. District 3 comprises 42 historic properties, many constructed for and rented by winter residents whom traveled to Aiken not solely from the north, but from cities all over the United States, including New Orleans. These properties demonstrate arts and craft architectural styles, including the Craftsman and Bungalow, as well as shingle, Gothic, Tudor, and country estate styles. These styles were notorious for blending in with nature, and many reference the medieval period. Also, District 3 is comprised of tree-lined streets and park-lined medians, which today we like to call green space. Aiken Prep School, which is included in District 3, wonderfully demonstrates the ideals and style of the arts and craft movement. The school was essentially founded as a, quote, country day and boarding school, end quote. The Country Day School movement was a movement in progressive education that originated in the U.S. during the late 19th century and shared many values with the arts and craft movement. At Aiken Prep, founded in 1916 in the rural, idyllic setting of Aiken, attracted the sons of affluent families residing locally and in major cities and offered, quote, out-of-doors, end quote, classes and after-school sports. The buildings on the campus are designed in the arts and craftsman tradition. As the historic Aiken Hospital is architecturally and historically significant, and looking at, I encourage the Design Review Board Historic Preservation to extend the historic overlay district to include the historic Aiken Hospital main building, nurses building, and iron sandstone wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Don, what is this photo? Do you know in our package?
That's the current proposed elevation, and Mary Catherine has it. She can pull it up. It's a 3-story brick apartment building it's not necessarily the final drawing, but it's a close facsimile to what they're proposing, I believe.
I think I did the rendering. I didn't include the elevation.
It was
in this.
submitted along with the new concept plan. Well, there's that rendering there, and that may be the rendering for your black and white that you have,
This is the most recent rendering
that you
they
have up
submitted.
there.
So are these referencing materials? I mean, what are the materials on there? It's brick, obviously.
Yeah, it's brick, but it's intermixed with some brick and some, it looks like some siding maybe
You may want
in there.
to
Do
bring
you
them
want
back up.
to address?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to,
You're going to give your name, right?
yeah. Ryan Bland, Planning Director, and I know this is kind of difficult to not intermingle the two because there is a proposed concept plan that's going before Planning Commission. But I would try to remind the board also, because there's been a lot of discussion about what that current plan is, that the decision based on the zoning ordinance, you have the 5 criteria about what would designate a historic, or what would, you know, whether it meets any of those 5 criteria to be a historic relevant property and eligible for the local register.
Right.
And so, like I said, I know there's been a lot of discussion on that, but I just kind of want to make sure the board kind of keeps that in mind as they move forward in discussion, that it is those 5 criteria, not so much the details of their plan that you need to ultimately
That could
focus on
come
when you make your
later.
decision.
Right, that's correct. Good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, and these comments may be more appropriate later on.
But I guess my point is, I'm still not sure what makes it not as viable if it's in the historic district. I'm trying to say, is it because it requires a change in the materials that are used? Is it another review process? Trying to be sensitive to business needs and moving business opportunities forward in the city, but also protecting our charm and history. So I'm just not sure why
Why it wouldn't be
What is-
designated, why it would
yes,
not be?
what would be the ramifications, really cost-wise, if the whole parcel was in the, and I know we're not supposed to talk cost as part of it. It's either historic or it's not, but you still have to be mindful of.
Well, we probably, this is probably a good time to discuss the motion does need to include how you designate the buildings. Even if you vote to approve the application and you enlarge the historic district, we need to designate the main building is either contributing, I would assume it'd be at least contributing, or landmark. And that would give it a higher level if it's landmark. But at least it probably is contributing if that's the reason to put this in the historic district. Nurses building would be the same, and then there's 2 other metal buildings that I think you'd mention as non-contributing. So you could decide about the nurses station, nurses building, whether it would be contributing or even non-contributing. I think it's probably the age and the style of architecture. If the main building qualifies, then the nurses building would too. So those are things that are part of this, that have to be part of this process tonight. Another option is someone making a motion to designate the individual building itself. And then we have review of changes of to the building, but not of the site. If it would then come back to us to show what they're doing with the existing building. Does that make sense?
But what I'm asking is what would be the negative for the developer if the whole site was,
Yeah, I think that I don't want to speak for him, but they'll have to figure out how to incorporate the nurses' building into their
does it change the
concept.
materials they use on the the other four buildings because it's a historic property? When it comes to us, does it fall under the new building guidelines like Mickey and them went through when they built their house
Yes,
in the
yeah,
historic
that's right.
district?
The new buildings would, obviously, if, maybe if that's what you're asking, I'm sorry.
That's what I'm
That if the whole site's part of the historic district, then we review the architecture. The questions we were getting into that we were not there yet, we would then review the exterior, the architecture, and the type of materials. If the whole property is designated in part of the historic district. If only the old building is designated, we would not really have a say or any review of the new buildings. Planning Commission, City Council would. I believe that's correct. If that makes, you want to clarify? Yeah, Martin, come, it's okay, come ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Martin Buckley, still on Two Notch Road. I think we're really getting somewhere with this. I'm very excited. If we kept the designation just as it is, it really only mentions the two buildings and the property, and we could figure out what to do with that nurses building. Now, wouldn't that make a wonderful office and do recreation? And you all came up with this. I mean, it's brilliant. If we could do that and keep all this in the front and then hide all the new stuff in the back, that would be good architecture. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the clarification, yeah. Okay, are y'all ready to have a motion, and then we can even discuss, unless we have someone else who would like to comment, okay?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve, or we recommend to the city council the designation of this property as historic and add it into the historic district,
Entire site.
the
okay.
entire site.
Okay, do we have,
The hospital and the nurses' building be designated as landmark?
okay, that's your motion?
That the hospital be designated as landmark, the nurses' building contributing, the rock fence as landmark,
And the two metal buildings
as non-contributing.
Okay, do y'all have that? Okay. Now, we got the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All righty. Now, discussion?
Yeah, I mean, we as a board reviewed this on the merits of being a historic property once before. We unanimously determined that it was, and we should continue that. I have heard no reason that it should not be part of the historic district.
Yeah, and the requirements have to do with a person nationally known, that the
In accordance
architect.
with the criteria.
Right, so I think y'all established that criteria once before.
Right.
But Yeah, any other discussion?
I wanted, would you mind commenting on how you determined the criteria for each one of the buildings about, you said the main structure was classified as, and I didn't write it down, so
Landmark.
landmark. And so that,
It's significant enough,
okay. But the nurses building will be contributing,
contributing
okay. And then the wall you said was landmark, and
landmark,
the rest of them are non-contributing.
right.
Okay, just wanted to hear that again in my head. So,
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Okay. All righty. Looks like it's approved, and
do we have any nays?
we have one nay. Mhm. Okay. Good. We'll have another, now we have another item here, two other items.
Right. The next item of old business is special tax assessment application, number tax 023. Applicant Arthur Bremer requests final approval of restoration work at 607 Colleton Avenue Southeast for the purpose of the special tax assessment for historic properties. Tax map number 12109-10001. Mr. Bremer has requested a continuance. Again, he realistically anticipates that all work will be completed in time for review and a walkthrough at the February meeting.
Good. Now, I don't think we need any discussion, or it's just a formality. If one of you all would move for the continuation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move we continue this to the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of continuing the application for the Bremer property at 607 Colleton Avenue, raise your right hand. Okay, that's so moved. Now, we'll, at this point, I think we need to go ahead and elect officers. That's what our agenda is calling for. Do I hear any nominations for chair? And I'm not running. I'm willing to serve, but I'm not running, so.
I'd like to nominate McDonald for our chairman.
Second.
Any other nominations? I guess nominations are closed then, if we don't hear any others. All right. That's by acclamation, I guess, is it not, if you don't have another nomination? We can vote. All in favor of McDonald being chair for the new year? Okay. I'm abstaining. Now, the vice chair slot, nominations for that?
Nominate Lucy.
Okay.
A second.
Okay. Any other nominations? All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. And I think that our board, our staff member, we may go ahead and just make that a formal vote that Mary Catherine be the official secretary. Are you prepared to serve in that capacity?
I'm learning more every meeting. Very much.
More than you want to know, probably. Okay, well, would somebody like to make a nomination on secretary?
Nominate Mary Catherine as secretary.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, now what is her last name now?
Well,
Drake.
are we nominating Mary Catherine, or are we nominating her position?
I think we're nominating her.
Her, okay.
In this case, yeah, because she's a real person.
Okay, I'm just trying to be clear.
She did change her last name, though.
That's right.
Making that distinction.
Maybe she won't do that again.
Hope not, not anytime soon. Okay, you had a motion and a second?
Second.
Okay, good. All in favor of Mary Catherine serving as secretary? Raise your right hand. Good. We now have an official secretary.
Okay.
I think that concludes the officer elections. Unless somebody wants to have a write-in. And then, Mary Catherine, our official secretary, could you introduce the next application?
Your final item of new business is application number H19-024. Applicants Graham and Ashby Reynolds request approval of the addition of a chimney and extension of the existing brick patio and roof line at the rear of the house located at 260 Fairfield Street Southeast. And I will note that, again, for the record, this house was built in 2007. It is a non-contributing structure in the Historic Overlay District.
Correct.
Thank you. My name's Graham Reynolds, 260 Fairfield Street.
Okay. And what do you have to say for yourself, Mr. Reynolds?
So we started out building a patio in the backyard,
Yeah.
and then the patio was nice, and so, it would be nice to hang out here in the wintertime. So we said, well, let's just go to Lowe's and buy one of those fire pits. Well, that didn't go over too well, so we decided to do a chimney in the backyard. We did the chimney, and then we said, it'd be nice if this thing were covered. And so then we covered it.
It sounds like mission creep. Is that what it was?
Scope creep.
So here we are today.
Okay, and so I think we all realize that that what you did is now visible. The patio may not have been, but now with the chimney, it is. And fortunately, it blends in pretty well. I guess you all have some experience doing that. You all on the board have seen the photos. Mm-hmm. That's the same actual view, just a close-up of the chimney, which is the main thing you see. Any questions of Mr. Reynolds? And we have a neighbor who may want to speak as well. But
So just for the record, have you spoke with your neighbors about this?
I have spoken to one, and I have not gotten a comment from the other.
Okay, in favor or against?
One's in favor, and the fact that I hadn't heard from the other probably means they're in favor too.
Right. Okay.
okay. Yeah, thank you. We'll see if we have anybody else who'd like to speak. There might be a neighbor back in the rear who has a view of that chimney. And
good evening. Mickey Anaclario, 306 Colleton Avenue Southeast. I just want to give my full support on what Graham and Ashley have done to the house at 260.
Mm-hmm.
Don't see anything wrong with it, and I wouldn't think.
And you wish you had thought of it, huh?
Certainly. It was actually in the plans, maybe not the chimney, but.
Okay. So it was going to be a porch across the back?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, but a fine addition.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mickey. Yeah, he's the neighbor just directly behind. Okay, anyone else want to speak with regard to that? Then we can have a motion now, I think. And
I'd like to make a motion that we approve application H19-024 as submitted.
okay. Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to approve the addition and the fireplace as it was constructed here at 260 Fairfield Street. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay? Y'all can keep it. Okay, and let's see, I don't think this is an official agenda item, but our meeting schedule is included in the packet. You might want to not throw that away. And then, other than that, I believe we can adjourn any other business that we need to? Okay.
Well, there was one item for discussion, which we're not surprised we didn't get to it, but.
Has to do with the facade.
Right. At the next work session, staff would present a recommendation to you all to consider, recommending to City Council that we amend the enabling ordinance for the facade grant to allow awnings as an eligible expense for reimbursement. And just as a procedural thing, it calls for a letter, and for the sake of consistency and just streamlining process, we would rather just do an application, a simple application, rather than trying to pull teeth and have people submit an awning, a letter that includes everything to draw down for their reimbursement.
Right. And you're saying now we can't automatically put it on the agenda next month?
We can.
You could.
Yeah, we can go ahead
Okay.
and
Can we not do it now?
it has to be, since you would take a formal action to recommend,
Yeah.
it would require a vote, so it would need to be posted, advertised as an
Yeah.
agenda item. So we'll just put it on the regular meeting agenda.
Yeah, I think she thought if we had time, we would have discussed it in the work session, but we're discussing it now, and y'all are familiar with really what they want to put on the agenda. Yeah, as a formality. That would make, owning is sort of a major part of the facade downtown, I think. Mhm. Okay, well, good. I think now we can declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Was it